So what now? I reckon you want a kiss?
Kissing would be nice, yes?
It was recently announced that the new upcoming Disney Plus show focused on Tiana from Princess and the Frog was just cancelled. But all of this got me thinking on how Tiana even got here and where she can go in the future. It honestly shouldn't be this hard to tell another Tiana story, so let's take a look at her past through initial idea, through development, where she is now, and where I believe she can go in the future. Let's do a deep dive into Princess and the Frog.
Walt Disney Pictures, The Princess and the Frog.
Come, we pack her. That's new.
The Princess and the Frog was released in 2009 by Walt Disney Animation Studios. The notoriety of the film not only is based on it being the first Disney animated film focused on an African American princess, but also the last Disney 2D animated feature film. The traditional animation unit at Disney was dissolved in 2003, with many animators who were behind some of Disney's most notable films being fired. Disney was moving away from 2D animation. I wonder why. That's right, 3D animation was on the rise, and it was resonating with audiences far more than 2D animation. Also coupled with the fact that 2D animation was specialized and a labor-intensive process that did not allow for last-minute or large alterations the same way that 3D animation did.
Walt Disney was the ultimate risk taker. I mean, when he did Snow White, it was crazy to make an animated feature in the first place. It's crazy to start with a blank piece of paper when, no, I could go out and I could shoot an actor. What are you doing? You're going to start with nothing?
Disney had announced that Home on the Range would be Disney's last 2D animated film in 2004, but after the acquisition of Pixar in 2006, and John Lasseter taking over as Chief Creative Officer of both Pixar and Walt Disney Animation Studios, he demanded that 2D animation be brought back, at least for one more film.
When I came back to the Disney Studios, the first thing I did was we're going to make a hand-drawn animated film. The second thing is we brought John Musker and Ron Clements back, because these two guys embody what is Disney animation.
Everyone thinks of John Lasseter as being the creator of CG, which of course he was, but he also has always had a passion for 2D.
My one and only animation teacher in college once said that it may have been Disney that acquired Pixar on paper, but in reality it was the other way around, and it couldn't have been clearer than the way that Lasseter took over creative control of both studios. They immediately sought out and rehired past animators, and Lasseter rehired Ron Clements and John Musker to write and direct a new film. What I find interesting about these two is while they worked on Little Mermaid, many of their other films like The Great Mouse Detective, Aladdin, Hercules, and Treasure Planet all focused on male main characters. So I wonder, was there a possibility of getting a first prince-focused film? Like many Disney films, their story would be based off of a fairy tale, The Frog Prince. Now, from what I read, the story of the development of the film begins with a combination of two projects that were in development at the time at the two studios, Disney and Pixar. One that was based on The Frog Princess, which tells of a princess who kisses a frog and then turns into a frog herself, and another animator who was working at Pixar at the time also claims that his idea, The Spirit of New Orleans, which was a Pixar ghost story, was also added inspiration for the film as well. Taking these two stories into account will answer a question many fans, including myself, have had for the longest time. Why is Tiana a frog for most of the movie? Well, that's because in the fairy tale The Frog Princess, a king tells his three sons to shoot an arrow, and wherever it lands is where the future wife will be. One of the prince's arrows lands near a frog after the frog was able to showcase various special abilities and eventually transformed into a princess. There's also inspiration from The Frog Prince, which is somewhat similar, but the reverse, where a beautiful princess helps turn the frog back into a prince. In some versions, the prince has a royal servant named Henry or Heinrich, hence why we probably get Lawrence, Prince Naveen's royal valet. Also, an evil witch is said to have caused the transformation to a frog, so that leads us to Dr. Facilier, who is my favorite Disney villain. This fairy tale also isn't among the top 10 most popular fairy tales, so it would allow Disney to make some liberties on how they implement their ideas, meaning no random group of fans are going to be outraged by the changes they were making, and specifically having a black main character as the princess. But they would have difficulties from the public towards Tiana's character. It's important to remember that this was Disney's first time putting an African American animated character in a prominent role. And this may be surprising because Disney has been known before this to have diverse walks of life from Mulan, Brother Bear, Aladdin, and Pocahontas. But the Western animation industry, much like the American history, has had a dark past with representations of African American characters, and even animal characters based on African American culture and mannerisms.
All right, now that you're here, what can you do?
What can I do? Boss, what I can't do ain't.
Well, who are you?
Who is I? I'm Bosco. That's who I ain't. Nobody else except Bud.
Bosco, eh? All right, Bosco, show me what you can do.
Okay, boss. What's this here?
You can understand the hesitancy that a large studio like Disney may have when creating a movie for this first black princess placed in a somewhat modern context. Because with the nature of American history and African American history, what time period could you show and not at least acknowledge the societal pressures of the time for black people? And how do you make sure that you don't fall into the dark representations that plague the animation of the past? I think it's important to note that even in our modern age, these things are not easy to do and are very delicate to get right. And Disney didn't get it right the first time. When first announcing the film, the original title was The Frog Princess, taken directly from the fairy tale. It was originally announced in July 2006, and in 2007, early concepts and songs and presentations were introduced. These announcements soon brought criticism, mostly revolving around the representation of Tiana, who originally was named Maddie and worked as a maid. This may have been a callback to Cinderella, but for many, this brought to mind many racial stereotypes of the past, where many black characters served as maids and often were referred to as the term mammy. There was also criticism on having the setting be in New Orleans because just in 2005, it was wrecked by Hurricane Katrina, causing many minorities to be displaced. Hearing the feedback, Disney ended up changing the character's name from Maddie to Tiana, thank goodness, and changing her occupation from maid to a waitress. And when tackling the setting of New Orleans, many of the animators and designers stated that they really tried to capture what New Orleans represented and felt like, and not just the reality of it.
What we did on this show mostly was to research older Disney movies that we felt were very magical, like Bambi. What they did in Bambi was they more painted how it feels to be in a forest instead of painting the actual forest. So we painted what it feels like to be in New Orleans. You leave out the extraneous stuff and just put in the stuff that feels like that is the essence of New Orleans.
But these are the things that you have to prepare for when presenting a black character in a specific time period. And I think Princess and the Frog did a really great job of this, of showcasing the realities and social inequalities that existed during this time without overpowering the magic and inspiring character that Tiana was. And Disney was still able to throw in breadcrumbs and callbacks from their other films, one of the most prominent being The Star, by making audiences see it in a whole new way. But please, Disney, I would love to have an African American character that does not turn into an animal halfway through the movie. The directors knew that this would probably be their last time at creating a Disney 2D film. So instead of trying to compete with 3D animation, they decided to look back at the many successful 2D films in their history and do what 2D animation does best. Instead of trying to emulate 3D animation like Treasure Planet, they would focus on the things that 3D animation couldn't do, and focus on the things that only made sense with 2D animation. You can see this a lot in the use of shadows and scenes with Dr. Facilier, but also the Art Deco graphic style used during the song Almost There, inspired by the art during the Harlem Renaissance by Aaron Douglas, who was a prominent and inspiring African American artist at that time. The use of this style here reminds me a lot also of the 2D animation that was used in Moana, so I wonder if there was a connection there. And speaking about the Harlem Renaissance, that musical style, along with Motown and jazz, also greatly inspired the casting for this film. We have Terrence Howard, who played Tiana's father, Keith David, one of my favorite actors, who played Dr. Facilier, and Randy Newman, who was behind the music. But the casting of Tiana, the first black Disney princess was the most important to get right. And there were many in consideration. I bet there were countless of actors and singers who auditioned for this role. There was even talks of Alicia Keys attempting to get the role as well, but I'm not surprised that they most likely looked at the Dreamgirls for film adaptation, was released in 2006, which focused on a trio of black female singers as they rise and fall in stardom in the early 1960s. The cast included Beyonce, Jennifer Hudson, and Anika Noni Rose. All three of the women were in consideration for the role of Tiana, probably due to their performance in this film. And at the end, it was Anika Noni Rose who was chosen, and it was the perfect choice. Even only being in a supporting role in Dreamgirls, she was a standout, and she killed it as Tiana. I just wonder what that moment was like when she auditioned. The excitement of seeing the character through her voice must have been an amazing feeling. All of the characters also captured this southern drawl that adds to the art and animation so well, and something I greatly relate to as a Georgia boy myself. The Princess and the Frog was released in 2009, ending with around a gross total of $270 million worldwide box office. While it was on par with past films, this was not comparable to 3D animated films that were being released. Also, it didn't help that James Cameron's Avatar released just a week after, and we know how that turned out. This cemented for Disney that 2D feature animation, while it may have been the studio's past, unfortunately wasn't the studio's future. They even pushed their next film that was already planned to be in 3D to change its name from Rapunzel to Tangled, to get away from the Disney Princess label, which worked, with Tangled making considerably more at the box office when released a year later. And that brings us to where we are now. For a while, Disney has been talking about a Disney Plus series based on Tiana that takes place after the events that happened in Princess and the Frog. This was going to be alongside the Moana series, but due to a few unsuccessful films, Bob Iger decided to retrofit the Moana series into a feature film sequel, and I'll save my thoughts on that to another video. But many were waiting to see what they were going to do with Tiana. And we just got news that unfortunately it's been canceled. Now you may be saying though, hey, maybe this is not a bad thing. It could be made into a sequel like Moana. And to that I say yes. Yes, it can. Now, the Tiana series actually was originally pitched by the film's showrunner as a live action series, but they decided to pass, and instead they said she could do a animated series. Now we see how that turned out. I see the potential of a live action series, but I have no faith that Disney could successfully pull something like that off. Also, this is a bit different because we have to mention the frog in the room. Tiana is a frog for most of the movie. This doesn't really translate well to a live action show or series without some major overhaul to the story. My idea, that was actually mostly inspired by my mother's idea, so thank you Mom, is a pretty simple one. Create a feature film sequel that takes place in Maldonia. Maldonia is the vague origin country of Prince Naveen, and I've seen many theories of what the culture is, and it's all pretty up in the air, which means it's perfect for a lot of creative opportunity to create a pretty interesting setting. Plus, you will have great contrast with the first film where Tiana was in her element more or less to a more princess environment. I like the way my mother phrased it, where Tiana is gonna go to this new place, but she's gonna take a little bit of New Orleans with her. And that means all of the crazy voodoo stuff, Louis the alligator, maybe a new firefly, and of course her best friend Lottie. While in Maldonia, she may come into contact with new friends, but also new enemies as well, because like Dr. Facilier said, they got friends on the other side as well. I was thinking it could be like Princess Diaries situation of not quite fitting into the royal family and duties, but also there could be real world similarities to the events around the marriage of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's. And then lastly, it has to be 3D animation, and that is coming from someone who loves 2D animation, but general audiences just aren't there anymore. Making it 3D with a touch of 2D flair, not like Spider-Verse because I think that pipeline is cursed, and not like Wish, make it like Moana. Moana is primarily a 3D animated film with a few scenes that showcase 2D animation in a cute and neat way. This is how 2D animation survives in this film.
This fairy tale book said, if you make a wish on the evening star, it's sure to come true.
Well, you wish on that star, sweetheart.
Yes, you wish and you dream with all your little heart. But you remember, Tiana, that old star can only take you part of the way. You gotta help it along with some hard work of your own, and then, yeah, you can do anything you set your mind to.
Ultimately, The Princess and the Frog is a revolutionary film in the animation history, not only for the African American community, but also serving as the last piece of legacy of a studio that propelled 2D animation to new heights. While I am bummed about the cancellation of the Tiana project, I have faith that when the time is right, we will see Tiana again. Disney may just need to dig a little deeper this time. But those are just my thoughts. Please, I would love to know what you think in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you in another video. Bye!